Good morning. So today, what we are going to be doing is we are going to be taking a problem that is structured similarly to how the final exam is going to be structured, and we're going to work through it. So before we start talking about this as a class, I want to give you guys a chance to sort of wrestle with the question a little bit in your own minds and take just a minute to sort of sort that out. um, and yeah, so let me put the problem in the chat for you guys, and then we will go from there. A little bit more. Okay. So Tom was the fee simple owner of Firefly, a beachfront villa. The villa also houses a bed and breakfast for tourists. In 2010, he told his niece Catherine that she could live with him at Firefly rent-free for as long as she desired, provided she assisted Tom with the cooking for the tourists and did the necessary repairs to the villa. Tom explained to Catherine that he was unable to pay her as much as she earned in her previous job. Catherine gave up her job as a live-in helper, which paid very well, and moved into Firefly. Catherine was afraid of burglars, so she installed a high-tech security system at Firefly. Tom was present when Catherine had the security system installed. Catherine also installed new windows to the guest rooms at Firefly because the old windows were damaged in a storm in 2013. The installation was very costly. Catherine had discussed these repairs with Tom before repairing the windows. At that time, Tom told her to go ahead. Tom sells the Firefly to Jim. Jim has served Catherine with a notice to quit the Firefly. Advise Catherine. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into breakout rooms. You guys are going to have about 10 minutes to talk amongst yourselves and figure out what you think are the issues that matter here. And then we're going to come back and we're going to work through it as a group. Okay, so we're a little short-handed right now, so breakout rooms are going to be small, but we will see what we can do. Okay, so you guys have had a few minutes to talk over the problem. we've had one student who had technical issues and arrived like as the as breakout rooms were closing. So let me put the problem back in the chat so that Roseanne can be reading it while we start our conversation, and she can follow along because she deserves to be able to do that. All right, 1 second. There's one piece of it, and there is the other. Okay, so Roseanne, you can be reading while we start our conversation. So guys, let me start by asking you this. What's the most important issue in this problem? And a different way to think about this is if you were Catherine, or if you were Catherine's lawyer, what would be the thing that she would be most concerned about, that you would be most concerned about? Catherine being given a notice to quit. Right. Specifically, where is she going to live? Is she going to be able to stay at the Firefly? Is she going to have to move? If she has to move, where's she going to be moving to, right? Now, in the real world, right, just to sort of note the real world's existence, almost certainly Catherine's response to the notice to quit is going to be looking for a new place to live. Given these facts, there's a strong probability, I would say, that Catherine does not have the resources necessary to fight the notice to quit. But this is a property law exam, and so we can sort of lay those kinds of realism concerns to the side. We can deal with the hypo as it's presented, where the first issue is, does Catherine actually have to leave? And in order to answer that question, we have to know what her rights are. So how would we categorize Catherine's right in Firefly, her rights to Firefly?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am querying just the fact that he said that she could stay as long as she like, as long as she do these things. I can remember a scenario where we spoke about that when it was adverse possession, where you said that, where we discussed that a year is the time given if nothing is done. So I was saying, Catherine's situation, she has about a year to basically leave the the premise, because she was basically given permission. I would even say she had a type of license to stay.
Okay. What type of license did she have?
I want to say bear's license, but bear's license is ejected as the person said to move. But then bear's license still subject to the tailoring of equity. So I was saying that she she can't be totally pushed off the line under a year.
Okay. Well, I've seen some things in the chat, and Chad is absolutely right that, one of the issues here is what type of license does she have? But I want to unpack something that Johnny said in a little more detail. what differentiates a bear license from the other types of licenses?
Hi, sir. I'm thinking that the beer license, it is free. You're just invited to come onto the premises, so you
Right.
don't have to pay any rent. You don't have to do anything, and you can be told to leave at any time.
Right, that's absolutely right. The bear license is gratuitous. You provide nothing of value in exchange for the bear license. So this is, this is the license that that the Barbados Labor Party has to come and knock on your door and ask if you're going to vote for them, right? This is the license that the Postal Service has to come onto your property and put the mail in your mailbox, right? This is the license that your next door neighbor has to come and ask if they can borrow a cup of sugar, right? None of these people are giving you anything for this license, and so they don't have any right to it. You can withdraw it at any time. In fact, you can preemptively withdraw it by posting a no trespassing or no soliciting sign, right? And then you're announcing to the world that no, you do not have the right to come and ask me questions at my front door, right? So I'm not convinced that it's a bear license, because does Catherine provide anything in exchange for her right to occupy? Yes, she does, right? She cooks, she provides repairs, right? So these are valuable services, and so there is an exchange, there is a mutuality of obligation, and so at a bare minimum, we have a contractual license. Um, so let's talk about what rights Catherine has at law. Okay, at law. That's important. We're going to come to that in a minute. So we're not going to talk about equity just yet. We're talking about at law. What rights does Catherine have with regard to that contractual license continuing?
Right, so this is where I was fighting with the thought of the year. This was fighting with that thought. Contractually, she had this contractual license, and contractual license, the minimum from I tell you, on time with discussion, a person would normally have about a year to sift through any rubber.
Let me ask you this, Johnny. Let me ask you this. Where in the contract does it say you are entitled to a year's notice before this license is revoked? Michaela, that's a good point. We're going to come to that in a minute, right? So, um, so at law, right, contracts are limited to the remedies that they provide. And so at law, does the contract allow for a year's notice? No, it does not, right? Now, what I will say in your defense, right, in Johnny's defense to all of you, is that there is an equitable argument. You can, and the cases that deal with these issues are dealing with them in equity, okay? But at law, contracts are very strict, right? You have the contract, and as long as the contract is clear on an issue, we're done. You know, here endeth the commentary. So now, Michaela raises the point that Catherine's contract is with Tom. And I think that's an excellent point, right? What contract did Jim sign? Or agreed to, right? There's no writing, so there's nothing to sign. But what contract did Jim agree to? Right. Jim's agreement is with Tom to receive fee simple. Jim has no agreement with Catherine whatsoever. And so what rights does Catherine have against Jim? What rights does Catherine have against Jim? That is correct. At law, Catherine has no rights with regard to Jim. Right? Absolutely right. So what can she do? Right? This is the point where we need to start talking about equitable rights and equitable remedies. Okay? As Johnny was pointing out earlier, there may be the ability to obtain basically a stay of the notice to quit, right? A right to have some time to wind up your affairs and find a place to move to. How do we conceptualize that right? Right? So one thing is that it's just as simple, it's an equitable right related to a contractual license. Okay. That we're reading this contract into existence in equity. But could we make an argument that Jim is estopped from serving the notice to quit? Is there an estoppel argument? Well, let's start that analysis by asking, what are the elements of estoppel, right? Okay, so we're seeing a couple of folks who think that it's possible but aren't convinced, right? So what are the elements of estoppel?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
This is inequity. I think promise, reliance, and detriment.
Right, exactly right. So let's go through those elements. Is there a promise?
Yes, Tom promises um, Catherine that she can live at the Firefly Inn if she does these list of things.
Right. Tom makes the relevant promise. Okay.
Right.
Is there reliance?
Yes, I think.
Yes, absolutely. Right. She accepts the promise and moves into the Firefly. Right. Is there detriment?
Um, yes, because she takes the job and it's considerably lower than what she had before.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Right. So one of the things that other students in other tutorials have said, and that some of you may be thinking in your heads, is that the detriment that we can point to is the cost of installing the security system or the cost of installing the new windows. And I want to be very clear that when we're doing an estoppel analysis, the detriment has to follow from the promise itself. Okay, so the detriment in this case is the pay cut that Catherine takes in order to accept the job and move into Firefly. Okay, the detriment is not the costs that she incurs as part of living at Firefly. Okay, and that's an important distinction that I want to make sure that you guys are clear on. Okay. So we have an estoppel analysis as to Tom, right? That's fairly straightforward. How can we attach Jim to these estoppel claims?
So James is the new owner. James is the
Yes,
new
Jim
owner.
is the new owner.
So as a result, he being new owner, Estoppel will address him from carrying out his desire on the property because she would have had reason to bring these claims. So the Estoppel against Jim from continuing.
I'm sorry, Johnny, I'm going to need you to say that again.
I'm saying that the address to the Estoppel is towards Jim because really the property is sold. So Jim is who is going to be doing any whatever with the property. It's sold, it's not being sold. So a top of God be against Jim. That was saying.
I think I understand what you're saying. The problem that you're running into, I think, is that Jim didn't make any sort of promise. So we would be holding Jim to Tom's promise. And equity is going to be uncomfortable with that. Equity is going to need a better argument than what we've got so far. So, so what do we think could be the argument that would bring equity to the point of saying, okay, yes, we should apply Tom's promise to Jim?
Maybe that Tom acted ultra-virus in that he had the right to settle this account before he moved on to the next.
So Tom had an obligation to Catherine to protect her rights by, say, telling Jim about them and saying, "Oh yeah, my niece is allowed to live here so long as she does these jobs." I mean, that's still a claim against Tom, though, right? That doesn't, if he didn't tell Jim about it, that's a failure of Tom, but it doesn't necessarily attach the estoppel to Jim. The truth is that I think that the answer to this is that Catherine doesn't really have a great argument on these facts for getting Jim attached to the promise. Riandra, I'm not sure what you're asking. Would it be an issue if one decides not to argue for Catherine?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. So basically from what I was following is that we have all been trying to figure out how Catherine could have a right or how we could get the contract applied to Jim or Tom, the other guy. But I was wondering if it would be like, if it would lose marks if we decide not to seek arguments on behalf of Catherine, but just simply say that she doesn't have any rights.
I mean, so the call of the question is to advise Catherine, okay? And I think that you would have to run down all the possible avenues that you could argue on Catherine's behalf. But if at the end of that process you conclude that she has no rights, then that's a perfectly reasonable advice to give. But you have to do it through the lens of, we're trying to find a solution for you, and so we're running down all the possibilities, and none of them work. Right? So does good. I'm glad that answers the question, right? Okay. Michaela raises a really important point. Doesn't Catherine have rights based on the fixtures she put in the Firefly? Do licensees have rights under the fixtures doctrine? Do licensees have rights under the fixtures doctrine? Think about how we describe the individuals who have rights under the fixtures doctrine. What term do we use to describe those folks? Right, they're tenants. So are licensees tenants? No, they are not. Okay, so at law, if we are correct that Catherine is a licensee, then the fixtures doctrine does not apply. She is just slap out of luck. Okay, but we could create an equitable lease by estoppel. And again, right, we run into the issue of Catherine's rights are not enforceable against Jim because Jim didn't make her any promises. But what Catherine may be entitled to as an equitable tenant is the right for like a share of the sale proceeds, right? So she may not have the right to continue to live there. She may not have the right to remove the fixtures because the sale may have been executed before she was able to give notice. But she may have a right against Tom for a chunk of money. And that may be sort of the best possible outcome for Catherine, is that she's entitled to this pile of money. And certainly you would want to also talk about the doctrine that allows for an equitable notice period, right, to allow the licensee to find replacement housing. But so that's how sort of this analysis plays out, right? You're going to talk about the license that Catherine has. You're going to note that the license is granted by Tom. And so any rights that she has come from Tom, not from Jim. You're going to talk about how equity provides some additional remedies, but still gives us some problems because we've got this third party that we've got to sort of hang the equities on. And you may not be able to do that. And then you can close by talking about the fixtures and the role that they play in this. Okay. So what questions do you guys have about what we've talked about today? Or anything else, I suppose?
Morning, sir. In terms of case law, would that be applicable, like for um, showing Catherine's equitable rights or anything like that?
Yeah,
Like,
I mean,
in case law here.
yeah, as I said, with the fixtures assignment and a couple of other, and I may have said a couple of other times, right? You should feel free to use case law where you know it and where you think it helps illustrate your point. But I am far more interested in making sure that you understand the concepts than the cases, because you can always look up the cases, but if you don't understand the concepts, you won't know how to look for the right cases, right? You have to be able to, when a client is telling you their story, you have to be able to figure out what boxes does this case fall into so that you can go and find the right precedent. So does that answer your question, Michaela?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Okay. So what other questions do you have? Okay, any other questions? Last chance.
Sir,
Go ahead.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Can I ask a question about the assignment on Sunday? That's due on
Well,
Sunday?
I would like to hope that you're not waiting until Sunday to do it, but yes, go ahead.
No, I just want to ask a question about it. In terms of like answering it, would I use the same outline that you spoke about in the tutorial that you posted on YouTube?
I actually think you can strip it down a little further than what was done on YouTube, right? So on YouTube, I was explaining the reasoning that gets to the distribution of shares. When you're turning in your assignment, if you have correctly followed the logic of the co-tenancies, then the distribution of shares is all you have to provide. So does that answer your question, Michaela? Okay, great. Okay. Last chance for questions. Okay, well then I'm going to let you guys go, and I will see you this afternoon. So take care and bye.